Well, good morning. This is Roy Lilly, and as you can see this morning, I'm at the Basildon and Thurrock University Hospitals Foundation Trust. But I'm actually not in the hospital, I'm in a satellite of the hospital for the start of our new series that we call Game Changers. We're looking at things that are happening in the NHS, new innovations that are actually up, working and changing the game. I've got something to show you that is really going to surprise you. You say NHS and you normally think, oh, clipboards and bits of paper. Come in, let me show you this. You're going to be really surprised. Follow me. There's a clue. Control centre. Come on. Well, here we are. I'm in the control centre. Have a quick look round and you can see on the wall here there's three big screens. Fantastic big screen tellies here, I can tell you. Each one of these represents one of the hospitals in this group, and on the other side there's all sorts of control stuff which we'll explain. But I'm going to introduce you now to
Michelle.
This is the lovely Michelle. Now Michelle is looking after one of the hospitals. I'm not going to tell you which one it is because of all the patient confidentiality and all that. But if you just come and have a little quick look at the screen there, she's got there, I don't know, what does that look like? A migraine headache. Right, tell us what's happening here. This is really interesting. Watch.
So this shows us the empty beds within the medical side of the hospital, and the assessment areas and for the surgical areas, so I can break down in all parts of the hospital.
Okay, and how far away is the hospital?
Probably about 16 miles.
16 miles away, so you can see that each of these, the grey ones, represents a free bed and a clean bed. So how many free beds have we got this morning?
Probably about 15, 16
They got
beds
15 beds. Actually,
moment.
we shouldn't say that because now ambulance services all over Essex are going to be piling in to fill this up. So, but it's cleverer than that. Just tell me how it works. A patient comes in and they're given a little badge thing, I think.
So patients come in, they're given a badge when they've got a decision to admit within ED, and they get triaged towards a medical assessment or a surgical admission. And then we allocate the beds within the system, so it's quite a slick.
Okay, so we can link the little RDF sticker thing that the patient has with the bed, so we know that patient's in that bed.
We know that patient's in the bed, and when they're discharged, goes into a little box, and it will clear the bed.
Well, let's be clear, the patient doesn't go into
no,
it. No,
it's
not the patient. No, it's a little, so the little badge, when they're discharged, a little badge goes into a little box. The little box automatically tells you, hey, I'm in the box, that means the bed is free.
Bed is free, and
then we have to think about, is the bed clean? How soon will it be clean? Will it be empty?
So it makes it dirty as soon as that goes into the box, and then that sends a message out to a cleaning team that knows that bed's empty, and they will come and clean that bed, ready for us to allocate patients.
So they rush in with the mops and buckets and clean the whole thing up. Okay, fine. Now over here, that's Rebecca standing there. She runs the centre. What have I left out? Anything I need to add?
No, I think you've covered everything. I think what it gives us is a real-time
They're going to move you down a bit because we've got some of your phone numbers in the background, which we can't have. Okay, good.
So what we know is we know exactly what's happening in the hospital, but it also gives us, we're able to track how close the patients are to leaving, so we're able to plan ahead for the patients that are waiting in the ED department, and also those patients that are waiting in recovery.
Okay, and over here we've got Yvonne, who is the Managing Director at Southend Hospital. Has it made a big difference?
It's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Patients are actually getting to their beds quicker, and also the benefits to the nursing staff. So we've actually got dedicated cleaning teams that release nursing time, so that nurses can actually do nursing care.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're dedicated cleaning teams. Anyway, we've got a lot more people for you to meet this morning. Thank you all very much. It looks like NASA in here, doesn't it? I mean, if you think of the NHS, you think of clipboards and bits of paper, but this looks like NASA Control Centre. Really, and the hospitals are a long way away. Anyway, let's go and talk about it and find out how it all works. Come in here. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Say good morning, Roy. Thank you. Have a quick look at the audience. All these people have been carefully selected because they are the best looking people in the whole of the, where are we, Basildon? Okay, fine. Come have a sit down. My cameraman Oliver there. Good. Well, it's really, I told you it was really interesting, and let's find out a bit more about it. Now, I've got some guests with me here. Let's start over here. Tell us who you are. I'm going to shut the door so we can see you better. Fine.
Hi, I'm Deb Sutton and I'm the Director of Client Support at tele-tracking.
Right, so this is product is actually tele-tracking. A bit more about tele-tracking. Actually, what I would say now, tele-tracking is a product that's been around for a long time. I remember it 10 or 12 years ago when it first came to the UK. It's had various iterations, and this is like the new tele-tracking product that makes all this work. We've got Rebecca, who we've already spoken to. Say hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yvonne. Right, we've met Yvonne. On the end here, this good-looking young man is the medical director.
I'm Neil, medical director.
And that's Neil,
part-time surgeon.
And a part-time surgeon. That always worries me when people are part-time surgeons. I'd much prefer if you were a full-time surgeon. Anyway, never mind. And this is the most important person here is the boss.
I'm Claire Faneker, the Chief Exec of the 3 hospitals.
Right. Easy old job, really.
Very easy.
Okay,
yes.
if you just wouldn't mind speaking up a little bit so that we can be sure that we can hear you on film. So we're recording live on Periscope. So where to begin really is, I suppose, what problem was it that you were trying to fix?
So there's it's on a number of levels. So at one level, each of the 3 hospitals are pretty emergency driven. So high profile of A&E attendances, lots of pressure and demand for emergency beds, and the daily effort all year round, but particularly in the winter, which goes on for obviously 8 or 9 months of the year.
Goes from December to December, yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You made me cry, Pip.
I haven't even started yet.
Such a difficult job.
Have you got all day?
Yeah. Slash my wrist, there's a bed, you know.
So,
come on.
Yeah, don't wait too long.
Yeah.
So big effort in managing beds occupies most of the kind of management effort and most of the senior nursing effort.
Now, in my day, bed management were people literally who walked around the hospital with a clipboard saying, "This is Mrs. Williams. Wouldn't you like to go home, Mrs. Williams?" and nod furiously and hope the patient said, "Yeah, I would," and then we'd say, "Right, go." Not quite like that anymore.
Not quite like that, and the pressure on beds is such that it's senior nurses walking around the wards, it's staff from the wards going to the site office to report back on the number of discharges that they're expecting, the number of patients who've gone, A&E constantly having to come and talk to the site team about the number of beds that they need. So a lot of physical movement, but a huge amount of time. So that was the first thing, which is it's pretty paralysing for any hospital to keep that.
And you have a bed management team, don't you?
So we had three separate bed management teams on the 3 hospitals, but they can only do so much.
Do you ever transfer from one hospital to the other?
So I'm about to go on to that, because the other real driver for us wanting to put tele-tracking in place was the fact that as 3 hospitals, a couple of years ago we worked completely independently. Over the last 2 years we've come together, we've got some joint management arrangements, we have a plan to become one trust, to merge in the next year or so, and we've been out to the public to consult upon some new service models, which would mean that there would be, wherever possible, a separation of emergency and elective work across the 3 sites, and a concentration of medical specialties for the sickest patients.
Okay, so that's quite important. So you'll separate out. I mean, the big pressure really, I suppose, is on medical beds, isn't it?
That's right.
And then that overspills into the surgical beds, and that screws up the elective work. So are you going to move all the elective work into one place?
Well, we would like to do that in an ideal world, but the constraints that we have mean that isn't going to be possible, and some of the services that you need to support an A&E on each site, which is a key principle of our change, means that we can't completely separate it. But for example, in orthopaedics, we hope that we will be able to separate out the significant majority of elective surgery from emergency, so that elective would be done at 2 of our sites and emergency done in all 3, but with a concentration of the...
It is an interesting philosophy, because there was a paper published, I think, 2 or 3 months ago now, that's querying that as a philosophy, saying, actually, no, you need the capacity, you need the facility to flex.
Well, that's why our model is not entirely pure. Yeah. So we haven't got a pure cold site, nor do we have pure hot site, because that's exactly right. You do need to be able to titrate capacity.
Yeah.
But
and the hospitals themselves, you're going to bring them all into one umbrella.
That's right.
Right. And again, it's an interesting management philosophy because you're going to have a managing director running them anyway. So you could say, well, why don't they just have a board and run independently? What's the advantage of bringing 3 hospitals that clearly can run independently together?
So the 3 hospitals have got a series of challenges from a workforce perspective, from a financial perspective, and in some cases from sustainability, quality and sustainability. With the push for greater 7-day services, greater consultant presence required in the wards, and for us to be able to provide that 24-hour specialist care for those patients who need it the most, we need to clinically reconfigure. So in putting together a clinical reconfiguration where you're moving patients around, it becomes incredibly complex if you've got 3 separate boards with 3 separate decision-making bodies, 3 separate sets of accounts that have to be managed and balanced. So we started from a place of saying, what's the right clinical model for our population of South East Essex, this 1.2 million people that we serve? How should we organise our services such that we retain local access for people to come to the local A&E, to deliver their babies, to bring their children? But if you have a stroke, for example, that you get that concentrated 48 to 72 hours in a really specialist stroke centre, then
and it's what happens after the stroke as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we needed to change our governance arrangements, 1 for the purposes of decision making, and 2 because once you start to move money and patients around, you really disrupt the ability of individual organisations to be able to balance their books.
Yeah, and the public get worried as well, don't they? They think, well, my local hospital's not going to be able to look after me locally. We have
a big agenda which is about rationalising and bringing together our corporate services, which is about efficiency, it's about improving quality, but it is also about saving money.
Which leads us back really to the decision for you to entrust one of the key management functions of your organisation on 3 sites, which makes it even more complicated, which is bed management. And you've gone for this NASA Space Centre approach. Are you the first to do it?
We're not the first in the UK. There are a number of other sites. So there's Wolverhampton, University College London and the Countess of Chester, who all have this system. But I believe we're the only one in the UK that's managing 3 separate sites and in an off-site control centre. So we deliberately made the decision, with tele-tracking's advice, that we should have the control centre in a neutral space. So this isn't attached to any of the 3 hospitals where we're sitting today, and so we can. It's in a fairly central location between the 3, which are between 10 and 15 miles apart, and that enables us to pool our staff here and to ensure that we've got sustainability and a critical mass of people to run the control centre.
Okay, let's hold that thought there, and let's go now to tele-tracking. We're kind of neutral about products. Other products are available, but hey, you're here and you're doing it. When you came to talk to the hospital and to the board, what was your pitch? What were you really saying?
I think building on what Claire said, what we were saying was, what is the problem you want to solve?
Yeah.
And I think tele-tracking is very clear that we will only ever talk to clients about things that we can solve. We're not interested in trying to pitch for things that we can't resolve. And one of the things that the board here said was they wanted to address sort of nursing time to care because nurses were overstretched, and was there a solution that could help that, which we very much can. They wanted visibility of their bed management process and system, and what tele-tracking does is it lights up all of the bed capacity across the 3 hospitals. They also wanted to target their flow problems, as Claire's outlined, to try and make sure that we could minimise delays. And I think some of it was around having that 3-site ability to be able to load balance eventually, so that you could kind of make sure that the right patient went to the right place regardless of location. So all of those things tele-tracking does very well.
I understand I understand the premise. Fundamentally, this used to be an American company. Is it still wholly owned?
It's still an American company.
Yeah.
We've been in the States for 27 years.
Yeah, and it's commonly used across the States.
Yes, there are over 1,000 clients in the States.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's taken you so long to get traction here, really. But
we do struggle with that too. We wonder why the NHS isn't, banging our door down with the things that we can offer.
You need more game changers.
We need more game changers.
Okay, tell me about you advise the trust to put this in a neutral place.
Yes.
I kind of get that, but let's look at the logistics of that, because you're 16 miles away from one hospital and nearly probably 20 from another. How does it work? Does it go over telephone lines? Is it Wi-Fi? How does it work?
So obviously there's a combination of, our system takes HL7 messaging from their PAS system, so their patient access system, draws all that through into
So
tele-tracking.
are you in N3 or whatever son of N3 is
Whatever
now?
that is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know there's a new N3. I don't know what.
I know what it's called.
Neil, what is it called?
New N3.
New N3, yeah.
We're obviously up to speed with everything.
Yes, with all the technology, yes.
Yeah.
And obviously what
but
that does...
you are within the ring of confidence.
Yes.
That's toothpaste, isn't it? But you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason that we advise off-site, particularly for a 3-site hospital, is that if you locate it in any one site, there is the problem of kind of an element of bias can come into that. If it's located at Southend, then it can be very Southend focused. And we wanted to make sure it was as neutral as possible. Okay,
I get that, but I am interested in the technology of it, because it is a risk to have it, quite a long way away. So. What happens if a system goes down? Have you got a backup system? How does that work?
We have massive amounts of disaster recovery plans. We have, from tele-tracking's perspective, we have 24/7 technical support at the end of a telephone line, and all of those normal systems that you would imagine in any kind of advanced IT system are in place to make sure that all the safeguards are jumped through. We're not saying there aren't problems. It's an organic system. We have things that we have to resolve daily as people use the system and find out, how best to use it here. But actually, it's a very stable platform we've used for 27 years.
Yeah, and it's clever, but it's not super rocket science.
No, it's not.
It's fairly basic technology. Of course, coming to you, Yvonne, now at Southend, the boss of Southend Hospital. Implementation is always a big issue with these with technical developments. How do you get the staff to use it? Was it easy for them to use? All of that. Talk us through the stages of implementation from the sort of front line point of view.
So from the front line point of view, it was engaging. It was a sell around how it would benefit frontline staff.
Yeah.
And it was hard. There's a bit of a banter between the 3 hospitals. Southend took the pain because we went first, for the other 2 hospitals to get the gain.
Why did they go first? Did you flip a coin? we flipped the management coin and it came down heads, but we can't remember what heads meant.
I think Yvonne was keen to volunteer.
Yes, good on Yvonne. Right. So Yvonne was the brave one. Yeah,
so I think the issue for us was communication to the frontline staff, nursing in particular, but also we had challenges with our site management team, and the issues around how we talked to the other 2 sites as we were going into working closely together. It was an opportunity for us to really see whether this would be better for us. And we had probably at that time 50% of the workforce were looking for something exciting to bring into the organisation to make life easier.
I thought you were going to say we're looking for another job. 90 nurses a day are leaving. Right. I want to come back a bit. So here I am, a nurse on the ward. I've got 9 million things to do. Thanks very much. I haven't got enough colleagues. 1 to 8's gone out the window. I'm rushing around like a blue-ass fly, and you come along and you say, guess what? We've got a computer. You think, oh, shit. And how do you overcome that? What happened?
With a lot of support from Deb's team and some senior nurses that really were excited by the opportunity.
Did you go to another place to see it?
We went up to Chester
Countess of Chester,
in the main. We spent time up there. We had opportunities to show and tell the benefits. So nurse to nurse were really talking to each other to see what the benefits were. So we've got some key champions within the organisation really that would help sell it, and it was selling it. And also we were fortunate at Southend because we had another technical service called the Nerve Centre that nurses really got engaged with. So they saw another technology would help their lives.
So they were used to the idea that technology could be helpful. Okay, so I'm a nurse on a ward. I guess the journey for the patient starts with the emergency admission,
Yes.
or an elective admission. Doesn't matter, does it? But they starts with an admission. So they get this tag. They get tagged, right? Got to find a better word.
Badged.
For that. Badged. That's better, right? Sorry, badged. Don't use tagged. They warn me. Don't say tagged. Right, badged. Right. So that they get badged. And is that badge in addition to the wristlet that people wear to say that they're allergic or it's, and every time you see a nurse they say what's your name, what's your date of birth, and I always give them a different date of birth just to see if they're awake. But it's in addition to that.
Yes.
Okay, so they're wearing these two things, and you know where they are.
Yes. So you actually know from when they come into ED or if they're a planned admission, once they've got that badge on them, we know that they're either in the ED department and we actually will know what bed they're going to.
So you've got receptors in the hospital.
Yes.
It's an RDF type thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know simple technology, so you know where everybody is.
Yes.
Okay, so the only additional work is at the point of admission, people are given two bands rather than the one. One is the normal one and one's the tele-tracker one.
Yes.
And that's it then. So then they immediately know here that there is a person, and you link the nurse, then the nurse has to make an entry, don't they?
The nurse has to make an entry into the system.
Right, is that a dual entry, or do you just make one entry and it comes out of the PAS system? How does that work?
So you make one entry into the system and it talks to then your PAS system.
Yeah.
So.
And what PAS are you using here?
So we've got McKesson.
McKesson, and you've got McKesson on 3 sites.
Unfortunately not.
No.
We do have it at the same system at Basildon and Southend.
Yeah.
But it's a different Lorenzo system.
You've got Lorenzo at the other one. Well, that's quite interesting from the supplier's point of view, because that means they can demonstrate that they can interface with, and just to go back to you, that interface, is a consent required from McKesson or Lorenzo for you to access the PAS, or is that done by you? How is that done?
That's a very good question. I don't think there's any consent required because we're only connecting to your data.
Yeah.
We're not connecting to their system.
So, but they don't have to provide the access because you're going in the back. The reason I'm pointing at the audience because we've got the boss of the company here, Neil Griffiths, and so Neil, you're not on camera, but he is there. I promise he's here.
I'm here.
Yeah. So you can get into the back door of the major suppliers, and that doesn't require. How do you do that interface?
No, well, we've got a whole range. I mean, from our experience in the States, we work with all of the main EMR suppliers, whether that's Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech, and the ones mentioned here. So it's a fairly sort of straightforward process.
Cerner, IMS,
yeah, all of those.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is that they're, in our view, are very clearly a clinical system. What we're doing, this is a very operational
but some
system
of them, and it's not easy to do the interface, and I just wondered how you did that. But you do that on the basis of your experience in the US. Okay, fine, right. So sorry, just to go off on one there, but it was interesting. So then the nurse enters the patient data into the PAS system. At the same time, it's picked up by tele-tracker.
Yes.
So you don't have to make a double entry.
No.
Okay, fine. So there's no extra work for the nurse.
No.
Right. So then we know the patient is on the ward on a Yeah,
it comes up on the screen. We know that the patient is in that bed,
yeah.
and there are different ways that you can use the screens. Which
Okay. Can you find out if they're outside having a fag or?
You know, we don't encourage our patients to go out and have a fag.
It happens. Yeah.
But it does happen. But we do know basically, if a patient had to go for a diagnostic for an X-ray from the ward, you ask for a job for a porter on the system,
Right.
and the porter then comes, and it's proven that we've shown efficiency and productivity with the portering staff.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a minute. I just want to see basically how it works. Is an additional patient consent required to wear this, or do you just assume the consent?
Just assume the consent.
Right, okay, fine. So the patient's on the ward, and that's the job done until something else happens.
Yes.
So I suppose there is a capacity within the system for it to do other things other than just know where the patient is, and that
Yes.
might be the second iteration of the product, or when they come back and flog you an upgrade.
In the system that we've got currently is the issue around the portering service and the cleaning service.
Right, tell us about that then.
So the cleaning service is now that we've got a dedicated pool of domestics who are dedicated and called the cleaning team. They have relieved.
That's original, isn't it?
They've relieved the nursing staff from cleaning the beds, which has relieved time to get back into giving nursing hours.
Yeah, so you've got a dedicated cleaning team.
Yes.
I mean, most hospitals have dedicated cleaning teams.
Not bed
No, they don't.
No, they
Not
don't?
bed cleaning
Okay,
teams.
fine. Apparently not, but okay.
No.
You heard it here
Nurses
first.
clean the bed.
Nurses, well,
Yes.
well that's
Or
a
the
waste of a
domestic
nurse's
ward.
time, isn't it?
Yes.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay, so they know. So what we need to explain then is when the patient is finished being an inpatient and ready for discharge, the wristlet thing comes off and it's dropped in a magic box. The magic box sends a message to the call centre here saying, hey, my tag's been taken off, I'm in the magic box, the assumption being that the patient is then gone home. Yeah,
Correct.
right.
We then automatically flags for a bed cleaner to come and clean
Yeah.
the bed,
Yeah.
and can automatically ask a porter to come and transport that patient if that's
Right.
required.
Okay, fine. Now, let's come to Rebecca, who's running it all here, right? Tell us about, how was it for you, because it's a very complex, very brave thing to do. I mean, I must say, if I'd have done it, I'd have done one hospital at a time.
We did.
Oh, you did? Okay, fine. So I thought you did the whole thing in one big shebang.
No, we did it over 3 months,
Right.
between October and
End
December.
of November.
End of November.
Right,
it's
so you
very
had an
complex.
incremental
Yeah.
soft landing.
Yeah.
What happened?
So we kind of did a phase start. So we had some of the staff started at the very beginning, and then obviously more joined as we went live with each hospital. The team that work over here are clinical site coordinators, so what would have been your old clinical site manager, and they rotate around the 3 hospitals and they rotate to the control centre. So they stay active on the sites and are familiar with the capacity issues on site and are creating the capacity for us to use over here in the control centre.
Right.
So we went live with Southend first, and that was bumpy.
Have you got a technical background? Or
Yes, I'm a nurse by background, ED nurse by 15 years,
Yeah.
and then I went into management from there, and my substantive role is the Deputy Director of Operations at Southend, so very
Right.
familiar with the
Right.
operational challenges, and absolutely knew that we needed to create some transparency in the system, because
Yeah.
what we only know about a snapshot in time. When people were doing it the old way, we only knew what was happening in that moment, which made it impossible to plan. Things didn't always come to fruition, so we needed to shine a light on what was really happening.
And I suppose really if you are in the middle of a drama and you've got to cancel electives and all the rest of it, I mean nobody wants to do that, but it does make it easier, doesn't it, to know, to be able to forecast. You can see what's going to happen without people turning up in the morning and being sent home.
I think what we have for the first time is absolute overview of the whole hospital.
Yeah.
So we deal with all inpatient bed requests. So whether you're coming in for an elective procedure or whether you're coming in for an emergency procedure, we are responsible for
Yeah.
placing those
Yeah.
patients.
It's worth just saying that we can't show you on live TV the screens because of the patient identifiable data, but it is really detailed and it is really interesting that you kind of know what's happening in a way that it's unimaginable.
I think one of the things that we found when we first went live was that patients were getting into our hospital. We thought we knew, but we had no idea really the number of different routes that patients were getting into the hospital. So the job of the site management team trying to manage, half blindfolded really.
Yeah.
So this has just given much greater visibility.
Oh, yeah, I call it
to
flying
everything that's going
blind,
on.
and it is,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
the data. Okay, right, well hold that thought, we'll come back to you in a minute. Right, Neil, the medical director, what do you think? I mean, medical directors are always very difficult to persuade to do anything.
This one isn't.
Okay, part-time medical director.
I'd agree with
Are
that.
you a surgeon and a part-time medical director, or a medical director
I'd have
part-time?
to say-
Be careful how you answer that.
More sessions as medical director than surgeon, so
Yeah.
I have to be the part-time
Yeah,
surgeon.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
no, I think implementing any new technology is difficult. There's inertia in the system, and persuading people that it will be better once it's adopted is a really difficult thing. And I would agree with you. I think medics are probably one of the biggest resistors, and there's a a feeling often that everything's got to be perfect and every problem's got to be resolved before we can implement.
Yeah. Can I just ask you though? I mean, now we've got a kind of new cadre, haven't we, of young doctors coming in? You know, they're the WhatsApp generation, people who are just used to doing it. If you look at, there's been a big row, isn't there, about junior doctors using WhatsApp, and I think finally we've come to our senses over that. I mean, you've been around the NHS for a long time. Do you detect a change in attitude towards technologies?
Yeah, there's a massive change, and they're a generation coming through now who are using technology all the time. I think it behoves us to introduce the right sort of stuff to make it work and get these things working in hospitals.
The user interface is not complicated though, is it? As I understand it, people get a badge, they do the normal patient entry data that's picked up for tele-tracking, and there's nothing else to do, really.
That's right. And the problem is you get your early adopters who are really keen, and those evangelists or champions, as we called them, were really helpful.
Yeah, there's that Belbin curve, isn't there, that everybody trots out.
But you need to introduce it. You can hold off for so long, but you need to introduce it and then get people using it before you realise what the problems may be.
Yeah.
And then resolve them. So get the big safety issues sorted out at the beginning. It's a well-tested product, so let's get it in and let people work it through.
I absolutely get the benefits from the nursing point of view, but how do you see it from the medical point of view?
I think with the present system, it's mainly around bed management, and you're right, the consultants and medical teams have less involvement with that, but it does give them, it's been a stimulus to us to get the quality of things like board rounds a lot better, because they know that information then going into the system will help us to get flow through and mean fewer outliers.
So right, hang on, because there's another dimension here we need to be clear about. So as well as having the screens here, have you got them on your desk as well?
We have got access to them, yes.
Right.
I think one of the big benefits that we are trying to realise, we won't fully realise this yet, is about getting the patient in the right bed. So our hospitals have big outlier problems where, because of the need to place patients within the 4-hour standard, they end up sometimes being placed in the first bed that becomes available rather than the right bed. What the visibility that you have through the control centre gives you is the ability to see, actually, no, we don't need to place a respiratory patient on the gastro ward, because actually if we wait, there's another one coming up on the respiratory ward in short order. Bed cleaning team are there now, so we can hold off and get the patient in the right bed. So that's the benefit. I think one of the anxieties was the loss of control then, that clinicians who've been used to perhaps being able to say to a site manager or a ward manager, can you move that patient there, and that, sort of interfering with the process.
So now you have no access to moving patients, it's all done from here?
No, it should all be done through the control centre, so you put in a request.
But the control centre manage it.
Right.
But we said earlier that there are lots of routes into the hospital, and there might be someone phoning from an outpatient clinic and saying, I need this bed, I know I had a bed upstairs this morning, just get this patient into it. But this gives us real-time information. And the other key thing, going back to your elective question, was knowing our pending discharges. That's been a revolution in terms of being able to run the beds. Because
now that's really interesting. Just expand on that for me.
So the system allows us and the ward staff to be able to indicate when there's an anticipated or pending discharge for the day, rather than the actual discharge and actual empty bed. And in terms of planning the elective stuff, we can then say, well, we can get these people in because they can come to our elective admissions lounge, they don't need a bed straight away before they go to theatre, and then we know there'll be a bed for them later on in the day, and that makes a really big difference to the cancellations that you're talking about.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that.
And we're in terms of the performance metrics that we're looking at on a daily basis on each ward, it is their compliance with pending discharges, actual discharges and drop box compliance. So these are the things that we're using to try and nudge uptake and nudge performance.
Okay, and that really brings us then to the heart of this, and it's more time for care, which was a big theme of this. Okay, how do you prove it?
Well, it's a difficult one to get tangible evidence of.
How are you going to start to measure it? You intend to measure it, don't you?
We're already measuring it.
Are you?
We're already
Okay, how are you measuring it?
So we measure through the process of the penny converter drop box. We measure.
Just explain what the drop boxes are.
Okay, so the drop box is where the badge is dropped into the lovely box.
It's dropped into the box.
Yeah, drop box. It's really.
Well, I just thought I'd clear that.
And then the beacon knows what's going on with the discharge.
Yeah.
So when we drive those three indicators, pending, confirmed, and drop box, what you know is, firstly, the drop box, you know immediately a patient has been discharged, so you know that that bed is available shortly. With pending, you know that those discharges, as Neil said, can come later in that day, or maybe tomorrow's confirmed discharges.
Yeah, but what I want to know is, how does me, Roy Lilly, a nurse on a ward, how do I know I've got more time to nurse? Because I don't quite get that. I want somebody to explain that to me more clearly, because I'm running around already. I'm looking after. I'm on 1 to 8 if I'm lucky. I've got a few healthcare assistants.
So each
How do you do that?
Each ward has a bedboard, patient whiteboard, that is an interactive tele-tracking board. And on that board...
Okay, a whiteboard that's interactive.
Yeah,
explain
so
that.
You remember in the old days we used to write in marker the name of the patient and various milestones
Yes.
would be
With that
manually...
black tape.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they don't exist on our wards now. We have interactive tele-tracking whiteboards.
Right.
So all of the information that we can see here, the nurses can see on the ward. Now, an awful lot of information on ward level is asked of the nurses. Numerous people visit the nurse and ask that nurse what's happening with this patient, when's this one going, have the TTAs arrived for this patient? A big problem in the world is TTAs of NHS. What happens now is that whiteboard gives a lot of information, so you can update the whiteboard with the piece of information that you need everybody to know, and everybody has visibility of that. So those are time-saving attributes for the nurse. But also, if you think about porters and bed cleaners and managers and site managers, all of that information is now done through the system. So you used to have to bleep a porter if you needed something doing. So that conversation had to happen at the desk. Bleep a porter, wait for the response, then have that conversation about what you need. The porter would then arrive, would the patient be ready? All of that's been removed by the fact that everything comes through the
So now the porters know where they've got to go.
Absolutely, so they get it through, it's requested on the touch of a
And they're on
button.
iPod.
They've got an iPod.
Yeah.
Really?
That they get their jobs through.
Blimey, right.
But on
So
that,
before we had porters distributed in different teams in different places across the
Yeah.
hospital, and you'd be relying on, as you say, the bleep system, and they'd have to go back to their centre to get their next job.
And
So
porters
they'd be
walk
walking
10 miles a day on average,
Exactly.
don't they? It's
So
a
now
hard
they
old
can
job.
get real-time delivery of the jobs.
It's a tough job. Well, look, I mean,
The other thing is a lack of the phones ringing on the ward.
Yeah,
So
right.
that
Right,
bit,
I get that.
you walk on a ward and it's quiet.
Right, so just to be clear, so the information that you've got here at the NASA Control Centre is repeated on your desk and your senior managers, such as they need to see it.
Such as they need to see it.
Yeah, so that's your dashboard system, and it's also seen on the wards,
yes.
and it's seen also by the ancillary services that are so important in getting the flow through the system.
Yeah.
Right, okay, have we got any numbers on improvement of flow?
Yes, do you want to?
Yeah.
So we've been monitoring this. So MSB have been really keen on idle bedtime because you can do things to resolve targets, but actually sorting out flow underneath all of that is the answer, because that will solve every target. So idle bedtime is the time it takes between a bed going dirty and a new patient occupying that bed. So that's time in the system that's just lost because it isn't being utilised. So when we first started in all 3 sites, idle bedtime, which they couldn't see before, no hospital can see this, it isn't measured, was between 6 and 8 hours on each of the 3 sites. That's 6 to 8 hours where a NHS bed is not being utilised through nobody's fault, just that it's not visible. Since they've been using the system, in fact the data that came out yesterday identifies that each site has reduced that by just over 2 hours. So as we eventually go through the process of this over the next 12 months, the hope is that each of the sites will hit our best practice, which is 1 hour 45 minutes. That's the optimum time to clean a bed, notify somebody the bed is empty, and get a new patient in there with a porter. So that 1 hour 45 minutes is what we think the idle bedtime should be across the NHS. And actually we've already demonstrated with MSB's really, really diligent work that you can really reduce that idle bedtime and make a difference to flow.
What was it before?
It was between 6 and 8 hours.
Huge. That's a huge saving, isn't it? It's really. Well, it's really interesting. Okay, so what have we learned? Medical director, lessons learned.
I think new technology has got to be adopted, and we're way behind the curve in the NHS. I think there's a lot of lessons around how we introduce it, how we convince staff that it's a useful tool to use, and I think that's one of the major learnings.
I think it's interesting when you talk about staff, you know, because staff are the same people that order everything on Amazon, that book their holidays on whatever on the thing, that have Mr. Ricardo or Mr. Tesco deliver their stuff, and then they come to work and step into the 1960s, and we say, oh well, it's because the staff can't do technology. That's not true. They can. It's we that don't do the technology.
Well, you're right that we're way behind in terms of implementing it, but there is also a resistance. There is a natural inertia among staff. They don't like change, so it's managing that change to enable it.
People love change if they think they're in charge.
That's true.
And that's the trick of implementation.
But you have to have someone leading the change.
Who led this? Was it the managing director of the various? Did you led it? Did you? Yeah.
And
What have you learned?
What have I learned? I think exactly what Neil said. It's how you're engaging the staff and different cultures on different sites. And it was a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. So engaging with the domestic staff, the portering staff was just as important as it was with...
Well, because they are the ones that are probably most affected, aren't they? Because, whereas before they'd have a little bit of a light conversation with knowing they've got to go and do a bed and all the rest of it. Now they get a beep and a thing, and I've got to go and do it. It can be quite a heavy touch, can't it, to be managed in that way? Yeah,
but actually I think they have clarity about their role, clarity about the expectation. The bed cleaning teams that I've spoken to have been very happy. They have a degree of autonomy. All right, their jobs are stacking up, but they know what they...
But if we all start with the patient and work backwards and have the shared mission to say, look, our job is to get patients through this system as fast as we can, as safely as we can, and home fixed up. And it's the 5 gets, isn't it? Get in, get diagnosed, get fixed up, get out and get on with their lives. If we get everybody lined up on the 5 gets, it does kind of make the mission and the vision easier. I know these things are kind of lofty management speak, but actually they do matter. People have to buy into the vision of what this is going to do, and what this is going to do is to get more people through the hospital, more people fixed up. It's interesting. Lessons learned here, Rebecca, in the Mission Control Centre?
So I think really for me, lessons learned were, it would have been nice to have a little bit more time, but we did okay, but it would have been nice to have all the staff trained before we went live. So
that was brave.
Yeah. And one of the reasons is because we were the first multi-site, so we didn't have anywhere to get that training from. It was almost we had to do what we could in preparation, but actually what we would be able to offer to someone now is this is how we would do it, and this is come and learn from us first, because we weren't afforded that luxury.
I rather suspect people are going to be beating a path to your door. Chief Executive, lessons learned.
So I think there is something about once you've made the decision that you're going to do this, which we did, was you have to hold your nerve.
How did your board feel about this?
So the board have been very supportive in terms of understanding what the quality benefits of this are. I think the trick will be, as in any types of this technology, it of course has a quality impact, but it's not cash releasing. And so making it stack up from a business case perspective is a challenge, because yes, it drives better productivity, drives better efficiency, but it doesn't drive cash. So the board are interested to see what the metrics and the quality improvements, productivity improvements are. So we need to get smarter at the reporting of that. They're very keen to see that. It's also when you're under a lot of pressure, and we saw this because we went live just before the heat of winter, or the cold of winter, is that it's easy for people to panic if they don't feel that they've got on the sites. And I think we had quite a lot of tussles between the sites saying we're going to revert back to the way we used to do things, because we can control that and we can make that happen in their view quickly. What they don't, and Beth was very spot on when she said actually, they couldn't see it before. They can't see the delays. We can see them, but they perceive that they can make things happen quicker at times. So we've had to sort of stamp on that quite hard and make sure that people stick with the system, because as soon as you start to undermine it, then you will lose the benefit.
You've got to have the confidence to go through
people.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a small audience with us here this morning. Has anybody got any comments or anything they'd like to say? Now's the chance. Yes, the gentleman in the middle. Just tell us who you are, give us your PIN number, and we'll leave you to it. Yeah.
I'm Mark from PA Consulting.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what some of the sort of key metrics or information that you needed to know on the screens to help this work and look across the sites and see exactly sort of the current status. What's the key information that you need to know?
Rebecca, that's one for you, I think, isn't it?
So I think we keep mentioning it, but it is true. The pending confirmed discharges are absolutely what drive us. So having a really good expected date of discharge and that being updated in real time absolutely plans our day. So we're expecting patients to go home today at 2 o'clock. If that's not happening, we need that updated so we've got absolute visibility. And that allows us to map out today, but also to map out tomorrow. So for me, they're the absolute key pieces of information that need to be updated.
When you buy tele-tracking, you get access to our best practices. So tele-tracking's know-how over the last 25 years identifies the key drivers to get the best out of the system. So those best practices, which are pending, confirmed, Dropbox and some others, make sure that the health of the system is working well, and also that you're getting all of that delayed and that waste out of the system.
Can you benchmark between sites?
Yes.
You can. I mean, that's quite interesting as well to have that. Okay, fine. Well, look, we're up against the buffers of time. I'm overrunning slightly. The question is this a game changer, Neil?
Undoubtedly,
yeah. I suppose you would say that, wouldn't
you? We said at the very beginning our bed management was people going around with clipboards, and it wasn't real time, and it didn't give us the information to run the hospital properly.
Yeah.
So you need information systems in this day and age that are going to give you that real time information.
Yeah. Well,
Echo exactly what Neil says.
Yeah. Rebecca?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you.
Don't ask me.
I rather suspect
It's a game changer.
I might, last word from the Chief Executive.
I think it demonstrates that you, with a bit of technology, that you can really radically change the way that you do things. We hope that when we get to next winter, having had it established for a year, that we'll really see the benefits in terms of that idle bed time and ED performance. Well, let's hope.
Perhaps you'll invite us back and we'll come and see what it was like in the depths of midwinter. So there we are. That's the first in our series of game changers. You decide whether or not it's a game changer. It looks to me like it's not rocket science technology. It's applied very interestingly at a very sensitive part of the whole journey for the patient through the system. And I think, do you know what? I think it's a game changer. And thanks for watching.